In the summer of 1940, Adolf Hitler stood on the coast of France and looked across the English Channel. Just 33 kilometers of water separated him from the last country in Europe still fighting him. He had conquered Poland in 5 weeks. He had conquered France in 6. He had taken Denmark and Norway. He had taken Belgium and Holland. Britain was next. His generals had a plan. It was called Operation Sea Lion. The plan was to cross the Channel, land on the beaches of southern England, defeat the British Army, and capture London. If it had worked, the history of the world would have been completely different. America would have lost its ally. The Soviet Union would have faced the full might of Nazi Germany. The Holocaust would have spread across Britain. This is the story of how close that came to happening. To understand Operation Sea Lion, we must go back to the spring of 1940. Germany had just defeated France in one of the most stunning military victories in history. The French had a larger army. They had more tanks than Germany. They had the famous Maginot Line, a chain of fortifications, considered impregnable. None of it mattered. Germany simply went around the Maginot Line through the forests of the Ardennes, and France collapsed. When France fell, the British Expeditionary Force, the entire British Army, was trapped on the beaches of Dunkirk in northern France. Over 300,000 soldiers, surrounded, with German tanks just miles away. Then Hitler made a decision that puzzled everyone. He ordered his tanks to stop. He let the British escape by boat across the Channel. Why he did this is still debated, but the British got home. But they left behind almost all their equipment, hundreds of tanks, thousands of artillery pieces, enormous quantities of ammunition. The army that returned to Britain was alive, but it was barely armed. Britain itself was almost defenseless, and across the Channel, the most powerful army in the world was preparing to cross. If Germany had come immediately, Britain might have fallen, but Germany did not come immediately. Hitler paused. He expected Britain to ask for peace. He even gave a speech on July 19, 1940, offering Britain terms. He said he could not see why this war must continue. He claimed he respected the British Empire. He offered to leave it intact if Britain agreed to accept German domination of Europe. He waited for a response. The British response came through the BBC. The man at the center of Britain's refusal was Winston Churchill. Churchill had become Prime Minister just weeks before, in May 1940. He had been considered a difficult, unreliable politician for most of his career. Many in his own party wanted to make peace with Hitler, but Churchill was immovable. "We shall fight on the beaches," he said. "We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall never surrender." With Britain refusing peace, Hitler ordered his military to plan the invasion. Operation Sea Lion was assigned to Grand Admiral Erich Raeder, who commanded the German Navy. Raeder was immediately worried. Germany had a powerful army. Germany had a powerful air force. But Germany's navy had been badly damaged in the Norway campaign, and crossing the English Channel with an invasion force was a completely different challenge from anything Germany had done before. The plan called for 13 divisions, about 160,000 soldiers, to cross the Channel in the first wave. They would land on beaches, stretching from Ramsgate in the east to Lyme Bay in the west, a front of almost 200 miles. The problem was transport. Germany had no landing craft, no purpose-built invasion vessels. They gathered river barges, flat-bottomed, designed for calm rivers, and planned to use them to cross one of the most dangerous stretches of water in the world. The German army's generals had requirements for the landing. They wanted to land on a wide front to spread British defences thin. The German Navy had a completely different opinion. They said, "We can only protect a much narrower crossing. Anything wider, and the Royal Navy will sink the barges before they reach the beach." The army called this a death trap. The Navy said, "It is the only thing possible." The two services could not agree. There was another problem: the Royal Navy. Britain had the most powerful navy in the world. In the English Channel and surrounding waters, the Royal Navy had hundreds of destroyers, dozens of cruisers, and 2 complete battleship squadrons. If those ships got among the German invasion barges, the result would have been catastrophic. A destroyer traveling at 30 knots could sink a river barge simply by ramming it or by its own wake. The only way to protect the invasion fleet from the Royal Navy was to have air supremacy. If the German Luftwaffe could control the skies over the Channel, German bombers could sink the British warships before they reached the barges. This meant, before any invasion could happen, Germany had to destroy the Royal Air Force. This was the task of Luftwaffe commander Hermann Göring. He was confident, dangerously so. On August 13, 1940, the Germans launched Eagle Day, Adlertag, the beginning of their campaign to destroy the RAF. The Luftwaffe sent over 1,400 aircraft against British airfields, radar stations, and aircraft factories. It was the largest air operation ever attempted, and the RAF was waiting. Britain had something Germany did not fully understand: a secret weapon called radar. Britain's radar system, called Chain Home, could detect German aircraft as they assembled over France. This gave RAF Fighter Command precious minutes of warning. Instead of having to keep patrols in the air constantly, wasting fuel and pilot energy, the RAF could scramble when radar showed the Germans coming. The system was directed by Air Chief Marshal Hugh Dowding, a quiet, methodical man who understood exactly what he was doing. The Battle of Britain, that is what it came to be called, was fought day after day through the summer and autumn of 1940. German bombers came in waves. RAF fighters rose to meet them. Young pilots, many barely older than teenagers, scrambled to their planes. sometimes multiple times a day. The average life expectancy of an RAF pilot during the Battle of Britain was measured in weeks, but they kept flying. The RAF had two main fighters. The Supermarine Spitfire, elegant, fast, supremely maneuverable, could match the best German fighters. The Hawker Hurricane, tougher, more stable, excellent for attacking bombers. The German Luftwaffe had the Messerschmitt 109, a superb fighter, but one with a crucial weakness. It could only carry enough fuel to operate over England for about 10 minutes. If a German pilot got into a fight, his fuel clock was always ticking. For weeks, the battle was ferocious and extremely close. The Germans targeted RAF airfields and radar stations. Several radar stations were damaged. Several airfields were nearly destroyed. RAF pilot losses were severe. By late August, Dowding calculated that if losses continued at the current rate for 2 more weeks, he would not have enough pilots to keep the squadrons flying. Britain was closer to defeat than most people knew. Then Hitler made a mistake. On August 24th, German bombers accidentally dropped bombs on London. Churchill ordered an immediate retaliatory raid on Berlin. The damage to Berlin was minimal, but the psychological impact on Hitler was enormous. He was furious. He promised Germany that he would erase British cities in revenge. He ordered the Luftwaffe to shift its attacks from RAF airfields to British cities. On September 7, 1940, the Blitz began. 348 German bombers, escorted by fighters, appeared over London. For 57 consecutive nights, London was bombed. Then other British cities too: Coventry, Birmingham, Liverpool, Plymouth. Thousands of civilians were killed. Hundreds of thousands made homeless. The suffering was immense. But this decision to bomb cities instead of airfields gave the RAF the breathing space it desperately needed. While the Blitz raged, RAF airfields were being repaired. New pilots were being trained. Aircraft production, directed by the extraordinary Lord Beaverbrook, was producing Spitfires and Hurricanes, faster than Germany was destroying them. The RAF was recovering, and the German invasion was still not ready. The barges were not ready. The Army and Navy still could not agree, and the sea lanes were not cleared. September 15, 1940, is remembered as Battle of Britain Day. The Germans launched their largest and most ambitious attack yet. 2 massive waves of over 1,000 aircraft targeted London and the southeast. Churchill himself was at Fighter Command headquarters, watching the operations room. He saw every available squadron committed. He asked his commander, "What reserves do we have?" The answer was simple: "There are none, sir." The RAF fought with everything it had. That afternoon, against the German formations, fighter after fighter scrambled, attacked, and fought. The Germans lost 60 aircraft. The British lost 26. But what mattered most was the message it sent. The RAF was not destroyed. The RAF was not even close to destroyed. The RAF could still fight, and fight hard. For Germany, September 15th was a turning point. On September 17th, 1940, Hitler made the decision. That saved Britain. He postponed Operation Sea Lion. He did not cancel it entirely. He just postponed it, indefinitely. The invasion that would have changed the world was put off because Germany could not control the skies over England. And without air control, sending barges across the Channel would have been suicide. But the threat was not gone. Britain still did not know whether Germany would try again. The coastal defences of Britain were being built desperately. Concrete pillboxes appeared along every beach. Barbed wire stretched across English sands. Anti-tank obstacles were installed in fields where gliders might land. Church bells, normally rung every Sunday, were silenced. They were to ring only if German paratroopers landed. Meanwhile, on the other side of the Channel, the barges Germany had assembled were suffering. Autumn was arriving. The Channel was getting rougher. The flat-bottomed river barges could not handle autumn Channel conditions. German sailors reported that many barges were sinking simply from wave action in harbour. In actual Channel conditions, military analysts estimated that a significant percentage of the invasion fleet would have sunk before reaching the English coast. The men who would have defended Britain were extraordinary. The Home Guard, sometimes called Dad's Army, was made up of men too old or unfit for regular military service. Armed at first with pitchforks and hunting rifles, gradually given proper weapons, 1.5 million men, ready to fight in the streets, in the fields, in the hedgerows, for every inch of England. Churchill had promised they would, and they would have. And what would Britain have looked like under German occupation? Historians have found the actual Nazi plans for Britain. A document called the Special Search List GB, Sonderfahndungsliste GB, listed 2,820 people to be arrested immediately upon the German conquest of Britain. The list included Winston Churchill, Bertrand Russell, H.G. Wells, Sigmund Freud, Noel Coward, Britain's greatest minds, to be taken immediately. The Gestapo had already prepared 6 regional headquarters for occupied Britain, in London, in Bristol, in Birmingham, in Liverpool, in Edinburgh, in Manchester. Senior SS officers were already assigned to their British posts. Plans for the economic exploitation of Britain were drawn up. The deportation of British men, aged between 17 and 45, for forced labour in Europe, was planned. Britain had been conquered, on paper, before it was conquered in reality. But Britain was never conquered. Because of the RAF, Churchill said it best when he spoke about the Battle of Britain. Never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few. Those few were the young pilots of RAF Fighter Command who flew and fought and died through the summer and autumn of 1940. about 3,000 of them, from Britain, from Poland, from Czechoslovakia, from Canada, from many nations. The Polish pilots deserve special mention. They had already seen their country destroyed. They had escaped and made their way to Britain, burning with fury at what had been done to Poland. When they fought with a ferocity that astonished their British commanders. Polish Squadron 303 became the highest-scoring fighter squadron of the Battle of Britain. Men who had nothing left to lose, fighting with everything they had. Sea Lion. Operation Sea Lion was never officially cancelled. It was postponed in September 1940. Hitler intended to return to it after he had defeated the Soviet Union. He never did. In June 1941, Germany invaded the Soviet Union, and the focus of the war shifted east. The barges were gradually dispersed. The detailed invasion plans were filed away. The German soldiers, who had trained for Britain, were sent to Russia instead. Why did Operation Sea Lion fail before it even started? There were many reasons. The RAF was not destroyed. The Royal Navy was too powerful. Germany's invasion barges were not suitable for the Channel. The German Army and Navy could not agree on the plan. The weather was against them. But perhaps the most important reason was one man, Winston Churchill, who refused to make peace when almost everyone expected him to. In May 1940, when Churchill became Prime Minister, Britain's situation looked hopeless. France was about to fall. America was not in the war. The Soviet Union had a non-aggression pact with Germany. Britain was alone. Even within Churchill's own cabinet, Lord Halifax, the Foreign Secretary, argued that Britain should explore peace terms with Germany. Churchill refused absolutely. He argued that any peace with Hitler would be a slave peace. Historians have asked, what if Churchill had made peace? What if Britain had accepted Hitler's offer in July 1940? The war in Europe would probably have ended with Germany dominant. The Holocaust would have continued, possibly spread to Britain. America would have had no base from which to enter the war in Europe. The Soviet Union would have faced the full weight of Germany, alone, without the supplies and the second front that Britain provided. The decision to fight was not just Churchill's. The British people decided too, during the darkest days of the Battle of Britain, when German bombs were falling on London. Every night, the civilian response was extraordinary. People went to work from bombed houses. They queued for buses, past bomb craters. They slept in underground stations and went to work in the morning. The black taxi cab drivers kept driving through the Blitz. Operation Sea Lion never happened. Britain was never invaded. The German plan, that came so close to succeeding on paper, was stopped by radar, and by Spitfires, and by hurricanes, and by river barges unsuited for the sea, and by an autumn storm over the Channel, and by Hitler's strategic mistake of bombing cities instead of airfields, and by 3,000 young men who flew until they could not, and then flew again.